Good evening. I'd like to call to order the August 19th, 2024 Housing and Community Development Commission meeting. So first on the agenda is welcome new members.
Thank you.
And could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name is George Kavarkis. I'm an economics student at the University of Iowa. I was introduced to this opportunity by a friend, and I'm eager to listen and learn and hopefully be a valuable asset to this commission in the near future.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Kieran. My background's in GIS. I work for the county. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm Mary Ann Dennis, and I'm retired from Nonprofit Housing Development Corporation.
I'm Denise Seche. I taught math and computer science at the University of Iowa, and I'm also a homeowner.
And I am Kyle Vogel. I've been on for, I don't know, we've been on for 4 years, something like that now. I'm a property manager in town, broker, and own Keystone Property Management, so.
So since the last meeting, the former chair was not reappointed, so as the current vice chair, I am then going to lead this meeting until we elect new officers. So we are ready for officer nominations, and we need to have somebody nominate someone as the chair. Anybody can nominate whoever they want.
Do you want to run?
No, I don't. Thank you. I nominate Kyle Vogel. Would you accept that?
Yes, if you want me to run meetings, I will run meetings.
So do we vote on the chair first?
Yeah, I think you need a second, and then you can vote.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor of Kyle Vogel as the chair, say aye.
Nothing like winning
Aye.
by
Aye.
default of no one else wanting to do it.
Those opposed? Okay. Congratulations, Kyle.
Thanks.
So
Do I have
now,
to take over now? Is that what
Yes.
you're telling me?
yes, thank you.
Oh. Sorry, I gotta get logged in here. You don't have a printed out one, do you? Sorry. We did 1, 2, 3. Consideration of meeting minutes.
Oh,
No,
the
we
vice
didn't.
Oh, we
chair.
need a vice chair. Do I have a nomination from the floor for vice chair? Anybody? Somebody just say Mary Ann's name. So simple.
Marianne, do you want to run?
She's done it for years.
I'll do it.
Marianne?
I have a nomination for Mary Ann Dennis to be vice chair. Do I get a second?
I'll second it.
Any opposed? Passed by acclamation. Are there any other officers we have? Do we need a sergeant at arms? Nothing? Okay.
You want to amend the bylaws?
All right, so next order of business, then consideration of meeting minutes from the June 13th meeting. I was not here. Did anybody have a chance to look over any questions or concerns about the minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, message passes. Do we have anybody in the public who have comments on items not on the agenda, things that were not already scheduled to talk about tonight? I know why you two are here, so anybody? Yeah. If not, then we'll move on to item 6. Kristen Watson is here to present a fair housing presentation. Do you want me to give your little bio here, or are you going to introduce yourself? I'll let you introduce yourself.
everybody can see what's on the screen. Well, I'm Kristen Watson.
You should come forward a little bit,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a wanderer, so just wave at me if I'm not, if I'm drifting out of my zone. Thanks, sir. So, I know Kyle is on the board and, or the commission, and there's another person who's an attorney. So I didn't want to give my usual spiel that everybody's sick of hearing. So I thought I would give you a little bit of history. We tend to think of, why is this not advanced? Let's start going in arrows.
Might have to click through that way, sorry.
Alright. Basically, I mean, even those of us who work in fair housing issues, sometimes tend to think it's sort of fading into the past, but I thought I'd start with a couple of recent examples because it's not really fading into the past. This is Professor Nathan Connolly. He's a history professor at Johns Hopkins University and owns a house in Maryland. And he and his wife wanted to sell, had it appraised, and it was very obviously the home of a black family. They had black family members and portraits on the walls. They had art that had a black focus. He's a history professor, and his research focuses on the history of housing segregation. So he had many, many books about African American history and segregation and all of that stuff. So, and he was home when the appraiser came to the door. So it was very obviously the home of a black family, and the appraisal came back at $472,000, which he and his wife, who was also a professor at Johns Hopkins, and she unfortunately recently died, but they thought that was low. So they asked a professor friend who was white if he would pose as the owner. And they removed all of the family pictures, they removed the obviously African-American focused art and the books. They took Dr. Connolly's ancestor, I forget if it was his father or grandfather, had been in the military, so they had the folded flag in the presentation case. They put that on the mantle. They had the white professor answer the door, and lo and behold, $750,000 was the appraisal. And you might think, well, when did this happen? 2021. So that's a little shocking. And here's another doctor. She's a medical doctor. And she toured a condo via FaceTime with her camera off. So she made an offer on it without actually visiting the property. The offer was accepted, and she was in the middle of the buying process when she went to actually visit the property in person, and when the property owner saw her, she said to the realtor, "I do not want to sell to this woman." So that is May of 2024. And that's obviously in process right now because, of course, she is. The realtor, of course, said, "No, we cannot. We can't do that. We can't rescind the sale. We're going ahead with it." But the property owner was very vocal that she did not want to sell to a black person. So the property owner is still being sued at this point. So, I mean, those are a couple of examples that, lest we get complacent, this is not an issue for the past. But how did fair housing laws develop? There weren't always fair housing laws. Back 150 years ago, nobody cared. And the whole, segregation was fine. But in 1866, of course, right after the Civil War, when did the Civil War end? 1865, right? So the 14th Amendment declared, among many other things, I mean, that's where we get equal protection and all sorts of other stuff, but the 14th Amendment also is where we get birthright citizenship. If you're born here, you are a citizen. And that is important for a whole lot of things that flow from that, including the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which was our very first, this country's first Civil Rights Act. It stated that all citizens, anybody born here, has the same right as a white person to own property. And that was the very beginning, although just having a right doesn't mean you can exercise it, because that didn't do anything to, in practice, erase segregation. Just because you have a right to do something doesn't mean you'll find a property owner willing to sell to you. It doesn't mean you'll find a bank willing to lend to you. It simply means, well, okay, you have the abstract right. And it took until 1917, a good 40 years later, to say, okay, Kentucky, this was Louisville, Kentucky, had a city ordinance that actually forbade people from selling to races that didn't match the neighborhood. So a white person couldn't buy in a black neighborhood, and a black person couldn't buy in a white neighborhood by city ordinance. And a black person did buy, William Morley bought a piece of property in what was quote unquote a white neighborhood, and then the person didn't want to, pay for it. So it's, or I'm sorry, yeah. Anyway, it had a racial zoning on it, and this case was born, and the U.S. Supreme Court said it violated the 14th Amendment. And what's interesting to me is it wasn't because of civil rights. It wasn't like, oh, we have to be fair. It was, oh, this ordinance violates the 14th Amendment right to contract. So they weren't focusing on the fairness aspect of it or the segregation aspect of it. They were focusing on the right to contract. But it made the racial zoning ordinance unconstitutional. And then fast forward another 30 more years. This is how law works. It's very slow. It just grinds on very, very slowly. So we have in 1917 saying, the Supreme Court saying, well, no, you have to be able to contract freely. But still, many properties had restrictive covenants on them. And we still, I put on there restrictive covenants not enforceable, which isn't totally true because, HOAs, they can tell you what color your mailbox can be. You can still have restrictive covenants, but restrictive covenants based on race were very common then. And also religion. A lot of, and it wasn't only black people, a lot of restrictive covenants then said you can't sell to a black person in this neighborhood. You also can't sell to an Asian person or a Jewish person or a Catholic person. Those were very common. And two cases came up at the same time, so they were consolidated, and now they're just referred to as Shelley versus Kramer. But Shelley versus Kramer and McGee versus Sipes, the same thing. Two families both trying to buy property, and Shelley did buy the property. The person was willing to sell to them, but the property had a restrictive covenant on it saying it can't be sold to a black person, or in that case, an Asian person. And Kramer was a neighbor who lived over 2 blocks away, but he objected to having a black family living anywhere in the neighborhood. So Kramer sued to enforce the restrictive covenant, not the seller of the property. And this one all the way to the Supreme Court. And at the same time, the Sipes family was doing the same thing, the same situation, only in a different town. And the Supreme Court said, no, that does violate the Equal Protection Clause. You can't say that a person can't sell to this person or that person. So again, it's the 14th Amendment. And what's interesting about this is that the Sipes family's attorney was Thurgood Marshall. He later became the first African-American Supreme Court justice. But even so, I mean, that's the 1940s, and still housing segregation persisted because just because you can't enforce a restrictive covenant doesn't mean that you won't be steered, you won't be redlined, there won't be blockbusting. Many banks would not lend to people. I personally was steered when I moved to Iowa City. I mean, I am just amazed by this. But this was in the 2000s. We looked at many houses, and I noticed that my agent would just sort of not show certain properties. I'd give her a list of things that I'd found, listings I was interested in, and she just wouldn't show some of them. So I would have to say 2 or 3 times, oh, hey, we haven't seen that one yet. So certain properties, she'd, really talk up and point out all the good things about this property. And then we'd go to one that she kind of had left off the list several times. And then she'd point out all the anything she could find that was, oh, well, you might want to consider this, oh, this isn't great, that probably needs to be replaced. And all the bad things about certain properties, until finally after we had a list of 4 or 5 that we wanted and we're trying to decide, I knocked one of them off my list, and she just let out this big sigh. She's like, oh, I'm so glad. I didn't know how to tell you that, but that was not the neighborhood for you. And it was on the southeast side, and I'm like, oh my God, it's the 2000s. And this person is blatantly still steering. That was just amazing to me. But in 1968, we finally get the actual Fair Housing Act. And this would not have happened if not for a murder. The Fair Housing Act had been introduced many times in Congress, over 2 solid years before it was passed. And it was passed because President Lyndon Johnson basically strong-armed Congress and said, you will pass this. And it was passed a week after Martin Luther King was assassinated. Because Lyndon Johnson said, you will do this as a memorial to him. And Congress finally did because of that. Otherwise, who knows whether it would have been passed or not, because it had been debated for about 2 years and never passed. And the original protected classes were very few, just race and color, religion, and national origin. So that's it. In 1974, they added sex. And in 1988, handicap, which interestingly, it still says handicapped. It has not been updated to say disability, even though handicapped has become offensive, but it still says that. And familial status. So in 1990, we get the Americans with Disabilities Act, and oddly enough, the Americans with Disabilities Act, even though it has a very large impact on housing, it covers service animals and reasonable accommodations and reasonable modifications of property. It barely mentions housing. Rental housing is covered as part of public accommodation in the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that's the only way the Americans with Disabilities Act actually applies to housing. The Fair Housing Act covers all real estate transactions. So that's where you get coverage in buying and selling and everything. But the Americans with Disabilities Act only covers rental transactions as a public accommodation, which is very interesting to me. But this protects people with disabilities from all sorts of different discrimination in all arenas, and housing is just one of them. But it's also shockingly late, 1990. That's crazy to me that people with disabilities had to wait till 1988 for the Fair Housing Act and 1990 for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And Senator Tom Harkin, who's a long-term senator from Iowa, was the main sponsor of the Americans with Disabilities Act because he had a brother who was deaf from childhood. I think it was spinal meningitis, and he knew firsthand how people with disabilities were treated in the public sphere before they were protected. So when we're talking about unlawful discrimination, we're not just talking about people treating people badly. I mean, in our office, we call it the equal opportunity jerk rule. If you're just treating people badly and you treat everybody badly and you're just a jerk, that's not discrimination. You know, you have to be basing the treatment on a protected class. So it has to be that you're treating somebody badly because of a characteristic that's protected that they can't change. And what is a protected class? I mean, it's just a category that's protected by law. So that sounds kind of facile, but it's true. It's like whatever the law says it is. Different jurisdictions have different protections. And there are whole law school classes on this, but it's a concept called the intersection of laws. A higher law dictates to a lower level of law. So federal law applies to everybody, and then state law, of course, applies only within the state, and local law, counties and cities can make their own laws that apply within those jurisdictions. So in housing, for the Fair Housing Act, we have just race, color, national origin, religion, sex, family status, and disability. And then Iowa, you know, the glaring bunch of people that aren't protected under federal law, although some administrations interpret sex to include it, but gay people, sexual orientation and gender identity are not protected explicitly at the federal level. There are cases that say, well, you know, if you wouldn't be fired for being married to a man if you're a woman, but you would be fired for being married to a man if you're a man, well then that fits under sex. But that's a matter of interpretation, and it's not always interpreted that way. So Iowa made it explicit. And Iowa city ordinance adds more. And you might wonder why presence or absence of dependence when we already have family status at the federal level. It's because family status is specifically having minors in the household or expecting them, being pregnant or in the process of adopting. So Iowa City, at some point, the city council said, hey, wait a minute, there are other kinds of dependents. There's, you know, elderly parents, there's adult children with disabilities who will never live on their own. There are people who simply have unrelated people that they're responsible for. So, and what if you don't have dependents and your landlord prefers dependents? So at some point, the Iowa City Council said, hey, wait a minute, we're going to broaden that. And you can do that. A lower level of law can broaden protections in the same area without contradicting the higher level. But, you know, it's basically whatever you want to protect. Ohio protects military status. As you might expect, Washington, D.C. protects political affiliation. You can't discriminate against people because of their political beliefs. 13 states protect natural hair. So just whatever you feel like protecting, if you can get that passed, that's a protected class. And so what do people do if they're discriminated against? They complain to us. We take complaints of discrimination and we kind of serve the whole area, although our true jurisdiction is only Iowa City. We, of course, get people from North Liberty and Tiffin and Coralville all the time walking into our office, and we're not going to turn them away. So we help people from the whole area, but if somebody's not, if they're not in the actual jurisdiction of Iowa City, then we will send the complaint to the Iowa Civil Rights Commission in Des Moines. But we'll certainly help people. We're not going to say, oh, sorry, go away. And we also do equity policy, programming, and news, and we're staffed to 2 commissions. So that's what our office does. So I ran through that really quickly, but does anybody have any questions?
Could you go back to the city ordinance, Iowa City ordinance? Because I see there that it says source of income.
Yes, public assistance source of income, except for the housing choice vouchers.
Okay, right.
That's the only one, and that's because we, allow me to be a little salty about this because I wrote that ordinance. The Iowa City Council passed a city ordinance that said, yes, here in Iowa City, we will say that the housing choice voucher is part of the public assistance source of income. But then, as a higher source of law, the Iowa State Legislature, within 2 years, smacked us down and said, nope, you can't do that. So, but any other sort of public assistance source of income,
Okay.
like
SSI or disability.
benefits, anything like that, is protected.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I mean, we've had this conversation up here multiple times about Iowa City money only being used for Iowa City citizens. I am curious why you guys even process claims for tenants that are outside of Iowa City.
We don't process them. We send them immediately to the Iowa Civil Rights Commission.
So if they come into your office, you just tell them they need to go to the state office.
We will give them a state complaint form, and if they
Okay.
want to sit in our conference room and fill it out, fine.
Okay.
And we'll,
The way you'd made it seem like that you guys handle the claim and then process it and send it on to the state. We have had that question here more than once where we've had people get salty on this side about Iowa City money being used for them Johnson County people. So I was just curious how that worked in your office, so.
and thank you for clarifying that, because yeah, we're not going to be mean to somebody, but all we do is take that complaint and scan it on the copier and email it to.
So I do ask, how does Iowa City rank? I mean, where do we stand? I mean, compared to the rest of the state, I mean, out of 10,000 residents, do we have 1 out of every 10,000 residents files a complaint? How many of the complaints filed in the city of Iowa City are actually found to be with cause versus, I'm curious how we think of Iowa City as being somewhat of a more enlightened highlight on the Iowa map. Do our numbers show that? I mean, does our percentage, show that overall when we compare ourselves to the state?
I don't know that specific answer because, for one thing, everything's confidential. So it's kind of hard to compare. Like the state will release its statistics, but you don't know what comes from where. It's all aggregated. So I couldn't really answer that, but I can answer part of it. We can't talk about specifics, but a certain number of our complaints are misunderstandings. It's not actually discrimination. It's something, there's lay people and they're legal people and they don't talk the same language. And a certain number of our complaints, something actually actionable did happen, and some.
But you guys don't keep numbers. I mean, this is not confidential. I mean, you guys have to have statistics that you provide
we do
as a city.
provide the statistics, but when you're asking like, how does it compare out of every so many residents and all that stuff,
Well, but so even what is the numbers for Iowa City though? Number like last year, how many complaints were filed at the local level? How many of those were actionable?
I could get that to you.
Oh, okay.
I don't have it in my head. I do know that sometimes we get news organizations, and I'm really glad you asked that, because sometimes we get newspaper people saying, well, we never hear of probable cause determinations. We don't hear about that. The last time there was a public hearing was over 15 years ago. Most everything that is actionable is mediated or conciliated. Conciliation is when we say to the respondent, look, we're going to find probable cause. So what are you going to do about it? And mediation, of course, is what it sounds like. It's mediation is conciliation without the say, you know. And basically, almost all of the ones that have merit are conciliated or mediated, or they're right to sue, because the ones that are real money makers, I guarantee you, will have it for the requisite 60 days, because we have to have a complaint for 60 days before the complainant can ask for a right to sue letter, and then they can sue in district court, which is where the real money is. So if something's really egregious, we'll get the right to sue request. And if we get that request, we don't have discretion. We have to release the complaint to the attorney who wants to file suit. So the ones with merit are either right to sue, conciliated, or mediated. And if you want the hard numbers, I can go back and count, but I don't have that in my head.
If I could chime in, we are working on our analysis of impediments to fair housing, and I believe some of that data will be
Will be in
incorporated
that.
into the report, and that
Perfect.
report's going to come before you all.
Okay.
So our consultant is working with the Office of Equity and Human Rights to get some of that information, and then we also have a housing needs data, which would be some of the fair housing stuff that maybe doesn't get reported to the Human Rights Office.
Right.
So that will be compiled in the report as well.
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what those numbers really are. I mean, from a standpoint of like how many across the state, how many cities or counties have their own? I mean, in general, most places in the state, right, are just dealing with the state. I mean, if there's even a local complaint, they don't have a local outlet. They're just making that report directly to the state office of discrimination or equity.
I love this.
I'm just curious how many local agencies like yourself or local departments at the county or city level are there?
I can tell you that because it's an interesting piece of history. I forget whether it was Waterloo. Don't quote me on Waterloo, but it might have been. It's enshrined in statute that a city of over 29,000 population has to have a local office. And that's because there was somebody who wanted to keep their job. So that's where the 29,000 people came from.
So any municipality in Iowa that has more than 29,000 has, okay.
If you hit 29,001 in the census, then
Okay.
you've got to establish your local office.
Interesting, okay.
So a lot of cities have human rights ordinances, but they don't have offices. I know Coralville, with about 20,000-ish, they have a human rights ordinance, but I believe that they contract with the private attorney if it's because the state doesn't cover everything. If it's just a local thing, they contract, and if it's not, they send it to the state. So, but a lot of smaller cities have their own ordinance, they just don't have an office.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Down at the end? Okay. Well, thanks, Kristen. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks.
You can leave it. Thank you.
And I brought our brochures.
All right. Next item on the agenda is landlord incentives, number 7. Denise had mentioned, I think 2 or 3 meetings ago, we were discussing CDBG funds and home funds and discussing, Shelter House and Johnson County Task Force, and obviously a lot of these larger chunks of money that do go into 501c for affordable housing needs. And Denise had asked, about where are private landlords in the mix, which made my heart burst with joy a little bit, because it's a drum I've been pounding for years. I think at the June meeting, neither of us were able to make it. So we got it re-put onto this meeting to kind of just open that discussion again. I don't know if staff has anything particular input-wise. I know I came with a bunch of stuff to discuss. Denise, do you have thoughts in advance, or?
Well, I know there's a couple of people in the audience.
Yes, and I was gonna-
Are we gonna allow them to speak?
Well, at least I'm going to ask one of them to speak. I don't know if the other one is wanting to pipe in, or if Erica's just here to kind of to listen and
Okay.
be.
No, that just needs to be clarified.
But yes, Terry Vargason is here. Terry is both a member of the Greater Iowa City Apartment Association, the vice president of said association, and also sat on the most recent housing committee. I don't remember, Housing Task Force, was that what it was called? So I've also had, I asked him if he was able to make it, and I was going to have him kind of talk about what they discussed at that last task force and what came out of that, which really was just the funding of the damage mitigation fund, as it were. But yeah, I'm happy to kind of talk about the history in Iowa City, which is, I've been doing business here for 24 years. I know Erica and her family have been doing it, if not longer than that, and Terry's been around for about that amount of time as well. And in that time, 10, 15 years ago, obviously affordable housing wasn't discussed as much. Iowa City was mostly student housing oriented. We talked about Zone 1, which was the 1 mile around campus, and that was always kind of just an understood that that's where the student lives, and anything outside of that circle was where all the rest of us who worked for a living lived, and that really has changed in the last 10 years. With student housing expanding outside that zone, when Hawks Ridge opened, and then Lakeside, and then we see obviously the growth in Coralville with the banks. We saw more and more properties in that Zone 1, and not just in the outer edges, becoming more and more available for, non-student properties. And at the same time, we saw the city's incentives for, new developers to have either fee in lieu of or put properties in, and obviously, Steve and now, is it Rachel, right, at Iowa City Housing Authority, obviously have very much expanded the availability of housing choice vouchers. We see Shelter House having more and more ability to have homeless emergency vouchers, veteran VASH vouchers, that kind of stuff. But what we hear constantly is that there's a dearth of affordable housing for these people, that the properties just don't exist. And from the private landlord side, what I've seen for my whole time is that there's a lot of vacancies out there. And there's a lot of landlords that either have participated with housing choice in the past or may consider it, but the risks involved are greater. Without a doubt, damages, expenses, evictions, vacancies are absolutely higher when dealing with a higher risk population set.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you say a higher risk population set, is that because they have a voucher? Or are you
No, I think
talking
it's-
about,
Lower income, probably, or zero income.
does she have to get up? This is all being recorded, so.
Yeah, so, yeah,
No, I'm sorry, but I asked Kyle.
yeah.
Okay.
And yes.
I want some of your, I guess,
Yes, I mean,
I
the
know a
answer
lot
is
about what you're saying.
Yes.
However, there's a couple things that you said that I think we might want to just talk about.
Sure.
The language.
Sure.
When you
So-
talk about,
so when
well,
I
no,
s-
wait.
Oh, I'm sorry, you were asking
you
risk. I was
said-
going to explain risk.
You said these people, these, yeah, when you said sometimes it's hard to rent to these people. I think I heard you say that.
Okay.
And then you said high-risk populations. And I think that's, to me, kind of a generality that may not be
Right. And let me ex-
reality.
Sure. Well, let me explain. These people, high-risk populations, I absolutely mean families, people on vouchers, whether that's seniors on vouchers, whether that's, families on vouchers, VASH, homeless. They are absolutely high risk. They are higher credit risk. They generally don't have income. They generally don't make 3 times the amount of rent. They normally do not qualify. I mean, just like the same reason Iowa City has their housing program where they rehab houses, which is that population are a higher credit risk. They are a higher risk to be able to make the rent, make the mortgage payment, even up front, be able to pay deposits or first or second month's rent. And in Iowa City, we're lucky that we do have a lot of ability for people on vouchers or people, especially on emergency vouchers through Shelter House, to have like the 2 months paid and the deposit paid. But what we've heard for years is that the expansion of not as much the emergency, the homeless and the VASH stuff, but mainstream vouchers at that 60% AMI number, what I've heard for years is that we'd like to see more availability of units for those families and for those voucher recipients, because it's not always families, in town and out of the private landlord population, and not just having to build, not Shelter House not having to build a new building, or Johnson County Task Force not have to buy a 15-building complex.
Right.
My argument for years has been that these properties are available, but that it is tough to incentivize private landlords to take that risk because they don't have the same kind of ability to request funds through grants or CDBG or home or 501c availability or be part of the funnel that 501cs do.
Anybody can apply.
Well, I mean, I believe
that's
I've
what I
seen that
said last-
501c, that you had to be a 501c for many of the stuff that we've seen applications with the United Way thing. You have to be a 501c to even,
That's for United Way, but
is that not where all of our CDBG and home app stuff goes through?
no,
We
because
can-
LIHTC is for-profit.
Yeah, we've worked in the past with for-profit for like home funds.
Yeah.
I would say most people don't like to do it because of the level of financial scrutiny and regs that you have to meet.
Right.
But they could apply for home funds.
And right, so at that point, it's a matter of scale. It's a matter of a small landlord with 1 or 2 properties not having the manpower, the knowledge, or funds. I guess my thing is, literally HUD has an incredible document called Monetary Incentives and Reimbursements for Private Landlords. I mean, there are tons and tons nationwide of PHAs, Public Housing Administrations, Iowa City Housing Authority, that are using monetary incentives to get private landlords. I mean, I'm just pointing out that the numbers exist, that elsewhere, public housing authorities are convincing private landlords with true deposit mitigation funds, which is not you have to be literally at the bottom of the emergency housing voucher. You have to be denied by 3 different companies to even be qualified for the deposit mitigation fund in Iowa City, versus having someone who's on the bubble, right? Having a family of 4 who's looking for a 2-bedroom on Burlington, who walks in my door and they're on that bubble of, they can't quite afford a double deposit. I can't get them into the deposit mitigation fund without sending them out and hoping they get denied by 2 other people. I mean, that's the only incentive we have. And Terry, that'd be a good time if you have. So Terry was part of the Housing Task Force where they discussed what the intent was, at least of what we hope that intent was for the deposit mitigation fund. Could you talk just a bit about that task force discussion?
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Terry Largison. My
Former
right here.
neighbor.
I am a broker. I own FBA Properties. I'm a property manager. I've been in this game for close to 20 years now. So I'm vice president on the Iowa City Apartment Association, and I was part of the Affordable Housing Steering Committee for the City of Iowa City. I was the lone privateer amongst all the other housing people in the town. And one of the things that they got tired of hearing from me, as a matter of fact, they nicknamed it Terry's thing, is the risk mitigation fund, which, if you didn't know, was falsely advertised because it never existed up until just recently. It had a name, but it never had staff, and it never had money. So, no, it wasn't real. Okay.
What was it supposed to do?
It was for high risk, to assist with deposits with high-risk tenants, maybe, again, what Kyle was talking about, people that are on the bubble, to have some extra financial backing from the city, is the way I understood it, or an arm of the city, to assist them on maybe getting their foot in the door so that they could get an application approved. Because sometimes, again, if their credit score is low, the income's low or whatever, some companies are going to require a double deposit, which might be beyond means for some people. But what I understand, and I was told it was going to come to fruit, but now what I understand is that you have to be a 501c for that to be applicable, and you also have to be turned down 3 times.
When you don't have to be a 501c, it is a 501c who is, Shelter House is processing or administrating the funds.
Okay.
Some
Yeah,
of the stuff got kind of changed.
Yeah.
Involved with it directly, since then. But the intent for that was to help people and not maybe make someone or be only available to people that are just really, really at the bottom of the level of the barrel kind of thing, the lowest credit scores, the lowest incomes, criminal, whatever you might have. My hopes were that it was going to help some people that I might want to rent to, And I'm involved with the housing voucher, the choice program. I have been for years. I've worked with it. I have no problems with it. I know what I look for, and what I was hoping to see happen is maybe some private, some participation with private landlords in town. Because again, guys, we're building all kinds of new stuff, but it's high dollar, right? So in attrition, we are creating some older and less valued properties, which is what we need in this town, because we're the second highest cost of living in the state. So if you're going to live in Iowa City, if you choose to live in Iowa City, and that's a choice, it's going to be expensive, right? And so how do we help that? And kind of, again, my idea of how do we help some of these people that are not credit worthy or cash poor, when it comes to lease signing, these kind of things. They're good people, but they're just they're in a bad situation, and it doesn't take you long to be in this business, and you get a little weary, you get burned. Okay? And that happens with everybody, with housing association, with everybody,
Oh, yeah.
You're going to have some bad ones with the numbers, and so what I would hope to see is some partnership here, not just only with the housing authority or all the other the Shelter House and other people, but how about bringing in the community as a whole, because we have a lot of inventory that doesn't even know,
So,
and if we could even have a clearinghouse of some type, where we, and Cheryl Cruz brought this up, that if we had some system, and I'm going off on left field here, but where if there are properties that landlords have an inventory that they're not getting rented, how about putting these into a central basis where we can start helping some of these people that are on that right on that threshold?
If the issue is deposits, right, you're saying these people have to come up with a double deposit, and as a landlord, I have money from my tenants that sit in a bank, earning 0 interest, and I'm not touching it for the time that they're living in the place. And so it almost seems like having maybe the city say, we'll put up this money, but we're not gonna take it out of our account right now, we're good for it. So they don't have to come up with the money, you know, the deposits right away. But the landlord knows that the city is their partner in this, might facilitate some of that, not having to run out of money to give to the landlord to have it sit in their account to do nothing.
I think we'll run afoul of 562A because deposits have to be held by the landlord.
But if it's not a deposit as much as it is the city saying that we will
So, right, so a
reimburse you.
damage, so,
Exactly.
and that we can talk about.
Something that'll cover the damages and not call it a deposit.
And-
We're not going to the tenants and saying, give it to us now,
Right, and.
but,
We've got some backing, all the way, a lot of times what you need to see is just the backing, and sometimes these people can't get a cosign, but if you've got a good cosigner that comes behind them, you're not getting money from them then, but you've got at least a promise that if things go wrong, and trust me, I just redid it, I had a $780 deposit, I just put $3,000 in it.
Sure.
It cost $2,100 to put carpet in a 2-bedroom apartment.
Sure.
So in answer to
Oh,
that,
yeah.
Denise, let me also, so, talking about the HCB Landlord's Handbook. So for example, Terry was there, I believe, it was you, Mike McLaughlin, it was me, Chris. We originally first had a conversation about the damage mitigation fund, it's been over almost a decade ago. And at that time, what we envisioned it at was exactly this, right? If you're a landlord who takes in a housing choice voucher client into a property that you've never accepted HCV before, that if at any point they left damages and rent and damages more than whatever the deposit they held, the city would have a fund that a landlord could request reimbursement. And that is what's being done in other parts. The HCV landlord guidebook talks about, there's a couple states. One has a mitigation fund that's paid through general funds where to access funds, landlords have to pursue a small claims judgment after the fact and then go, and they have up to $4,000. The benefit ceiling is $5,000. You have 45 days to respond to the claims. There's another state that got rid of the small claims but only allows you, has to be a minimum of 500, or anything under 500, the landlord just has to deal with, but if those damages are in greater than, they could submit a, that was the original discussion we had. And then, once again, the mitigation fund was created as a line item in the budget, but was not funded for quite a few years until after the task force. And the task force did fund it, but the administration of that is currently Shelter House administered. So it has to be someone that's really coming through the Shelter House program. I was surprised at the time that it wasn't something given to Rachel to be administered from the Public Housing Agency, from Iowa City Housing, and it may be that Steve or Rachel didn't want it. I don't even know if that discussion came up. What we had envisioned it is the way that the federal government envisioned this kind of program, which is something administered as part of the HCV program.
So what's the source of the funding?
I don't know where that funding comes in.
Oh, no, that's, right now, the risk mitigation is part of our general fund. It's the affordable house,
Okay.
the $1 million affordable housing fund. I mean, if you're looking just at vouchers, so that would limit, if you're looking at a program that would be just for vouchers, all types of vouchers, that could be potentially through the housing authority. But if you want just like a general, doesn't matter if they have a voucher or not, that would have to be a different pot of money.
So I have just a thought. What if a private landlord had a consultant, hired a consultant that would say, private landlord said, I want to get home funds. but I don't have the knowledge or experience to going through this system, to the HCDC, to see if I can access those funds. And then that consultant would say, okay, I will prepare it, if you're awarded the funds, then this company as a consultant would say, I will guarantee that you will comply with all of the federal requirements. Then-
What's your question, I guess?
I mean, that's not a question, it's why
Oh,
couldn't that happen?
Well, I think it's a
mean-
matter of money. I mean, most of
No,
our,
wait, I
most
just
of our
wanna
issues
say-
are
I just wanna-
$1,000, $1,500, right? We're not talking about $10,000, $20,000 that most of our landlords and private investors are concerned about. It's the $2,500. It's the someone who
Well, you
doesn't pay
could
the
do-
last month.
So you can come in and apply for a couple $100,000, and then that would say, okay, that'll give me how many years to get
I don't
one
have,
household $2,500 of damage mitigation, or
Guessing, but I think
what?
the lawyer, the cost of getting that done for a private person, what benefit would I have?
it would cost us more than the one potential damage. I guess part of my issue too is I don't own any of the properties. I can't request the money for my properties because they're not mine. I mean, Terry and Eric are a little different because they own. I mean,
You have a company.
I do, but I don't own any of the properties we manage.
I don't know if that would matter. That
I
would,
mean, I would think that if those funds are going to the owner, most of my owners own one or two
I
properties.
think it would go to the
tops.
management company.
But the money's not in my name. I don't get the rents. I don't hold the deposits on my own, on Keystone. I hold the deposits on behalf of the owner.
Well, we'll just have to launch a further investigation.
No, once again, that's part of this discussion, which is
Yeah.
Things out here and just,
Well, I mean,
yeah, I mean,
there's maybe a need and maybe an opportunity, but it's never been.
I mean, but if any for-profit landlord wants to apply for home funds,
I wouldn't,
well,
I mean,
you could.
no,
I mean,
I'm saying
but
that's
it's
a
like-
lot of work and a lot of effort, and if you're talking about someone who owns one or two properties, it's like, no, it's much easier to just.
and those are my clients. I mean, those are my clients and.
But if
Yeah.
I had a partnership with the city, for example, and I said, I've got these houses that I would love to rent to people, whether they're high risk, voucher, whatever, and if I know that the city is gonna come back and say, yeah, if they trash your house, we'll help, because, they're part of our system.
And we
I
wouldn't
do
even be
not
having this
argue.
conversation if we had not heard from the city for years that there's not enough affordable housing.
But then
Right, if the city
again-
was coming forward saying everybody who needs affordable housing in Iowa City is currently taken care of, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I mean, we're having this conversation because we're being told that there's not enough affordable housing. We know there's vacant units being held by private landlords. And in some cases, and not in all, you are absolutely gonna have landlords who will never accept, housing choice vouchers, as
Right.
an acceptable. There are those people. I'm not asking about those people.
But to play the devil's advocate a little
Sure.
bit, as a taxpayer in the city of Iowa City, if somebody rents your house, and I'm going way overboard, but,
Yeah.
and trashes your house, I mean,
But don't we do that already for
I
shelter
don't want my
house?
tax,
I mean, we approved,
I'm not
shelter house.
done,
Oh, sorry,
Kyle.
sorry, I'm sorry, Mary. Oh.
I, I'm just trying to say, are you gonna get that passed? I mean, I don't want my tax dollars to pay because you picked a bad tenant. Sorry, can't have some reserves.
But maybe that's where the partnership and a clearinghouse might work, to where you have the people that the city has identified as, in need of work and housing crisis, and yet have detriments, in their background. You've got a landlord that's got property that's willing to work with. The city's gonna spend some money on these people in one way or another. I'm just guessing, through assistance or shelter house or, crisis management. So how do we avert putting those people in that, partner it up to where we can, yeah,
I think we should separate out a little bit.
nobody's gonna be 100% protected in this.
Right.
We never are.
It sounds to me the risk mitigation that Shelter House is administering is mainly for people coming out of shelter or who are what we used to call in the business the hard to house.
Yeah.
I think that's one little piece of it. I think there are
I
families.
think that was the spirit of that fund.
Well, I think there are families out there who maybe they might have a good credit score, that, the couple, the adults in the family may be employed, they may have a housing choice voucher, they don't have a double deposit or something. But they still need a place to live, and they're not going to trash your house necessarily. I mean, it's two totally different groups, I think.
If you look at the name of the fund, risk mitigation. It doesn't
I
say
understand, so there's
last
got to,
chance, last-
then let's put something else in there to provide you, as a private landlord, to have some other kind of incentive that doesn't mean you're necessarily participating in that particular program, which is specifically designed for what we have referred to in the past as the hard to house.
No.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, a single mom who's working, who doesn't have a car, so she works in Iowa City, so she can't live in, well, Tiffin's not cheap anymore, but, she can't live in Lone Tree to get to work. You know what I mean? So, she'd
But
be a
that's
fine
also-
tenant.
That's also where risk mitigation, if the house is not damaged, for example, then that money is not touched, right? And so then it doesn't cost the taxpayer anything because those funds haven't been used. But the landlord would have the security to say, okay, I will take the risk a bit because I've got a partnership with the city. And if the city is screening people to say, yes, you're not gonna find a one-size-fits-all strategy for all the people who need houses. But if you target a particular family, whatever, that needs that extra assistance and can't come up with a double deposit, and you don't have to have that double deposit because the city is gonna be there once they vacate to take care of problems, if they exist, then you might get more landlords on board to be willing to partner in that way. And I would appreciate the city screening tenants personally, because I don't want to have to go find people as well. I would love to find somebody, a family who needs a home, where I can provide that. And then the flip side of it is, as far as incentives go, give me a bit of a property tax break if I don't raise the rent and charge the maximum amount. I mean, I would love something like that.
That's a good
Because
idea.
then I don't have to pass those expenses on to my tenants year after year as I get.
And that is some of the other, talking about the monetary incentives, there's some of that discussion from the federal side as well, which is in those, yeah.
Can I see the front cover of the document that you keep pointing to
Right.
make
Oh,
sure
sorry.
that I've got the right one up? I have the wrong one up.
Okay.
Okay.
This is HCV Landlord Guidebook from the Department of,
But it's not the 196-page version.
that one. I have this one as well. There's another one. There's the memorandum from the Office of the Inspector. There's a lot, there's a lot out there because there
Well,
are absolutely some
It might be
programs that have been
helpful
done,
for
but
commissioners if we had been able to
I just,
look over that
I
stuff.
literally did this afternoon. I'm
I
not
know.
gonna
Well,
lie.
maybe we should
And I could share this. Some stuff
educate
that's,
ourselves a little more.
and some stuff that's not in here is because I was hoping to spitball some ideas too. Something that's, and I don't know that Terry has any of these or Erica, but one of the things that kept popping up that we've talked about quite a bit at the CDBG stuff is senior assistance. And one thing I'm finding a lot lately is I have seniors who have been on housing choice voucher for years that really need more day-to-day assistance, whether it's someone come over to help them like take out the trash. And they've been on the wait list for the senior apartments for a year, 2 years. And I don't know that this is an incentive thing as much as a, I guess, helping transition current housing choice voucher people who are transitioning into senior that aren't quite able to, either they can't afford, are still living in apartments, I mean, I am running into the situation where I absolutely have clients who are asking, do we renew to them next year? Because trash doesn't get taken out. They become a infestation concern. They become sometimes they're lonely. They become a feral cat issue. I mean, I have a wonderful woman at a property who feeds the
cats.
neighborhood.
Right.
And she's in an association where I have the condominium association wanting us to get rid of her. And she has been able to get some help from the group that we found out about a couple years ago, the CDBG,
Trail.
those guys, yeah. Because I gave her that number to get some assistance, but even that is limited. So just talking about that 60% AMI, I mean, what does it say? 32% of our extremely low-income renters in Johnson County from this last report that we got, whenever that was, in 2021, 2022 maybe? Lynette, do you remember this one? I don't remember when this was from, but I found it in old meeting stuff.
Is it city steps? Or
No, it was from Johnson County. I
County.
think she
Johnson
came and
County.
gave a report to us about Lynette Jacoby.
Oh, yeah, Lynette Jacoby, yeah.
Yeah.
And that is a real thing. I've got 3 people
Yeah.
right now. I've got 100 apartments, and I've got a lady who's been in her one-bedroom apartment for 16 years.
Yeah.
And I haven't raised her rent.
Nope.
In 5 or 6 years. Because I know she needs
Way
it.
below market.
And I don't, at a certain point, she's gonna need a lot more assistance, I mean, just mobility-wise and everything. I had a super nice fellow, he lived in the apartment right next door to my office. He was in a wheelchair. He died a couple of months ago in his apartment. And I don't think he was getting the health care that he needed. And he was too proud and all that, stuff.
And any turnover's expensive. Any, almost.
No, but that's tough. I mean, that's a whole different level
That's
of,
the least of it.
Yeah.
You just don't want to see another person
yeah.
in their
Right,
older years
right.
living less than life.
And
that's
especially
like a
ones
whole
that we
nother-
have these 16-year relationships with. I mean, we have absolutely,
yeah.
we have.
Yeah.
So when we are talking about incentives, it would be interesting to see if there's anything that we can, and I don't know if it is a partnership with Iowa City Housing Authority, who knows who these voucher or not, maybe even non-voucher seniors, but it would be nice to figure out something that, whether it's a manpower fund or an income fund, or even, I mean, sometimes it's somebody that is living on the second floor for 15, 20 years, and you need to find her a place on a first floor apartment. And in my situation, a prime example is I can't just transfer her or him, because the property she lives at's owned by one person, and the property she wants to move out is another person, which means I can't just transfer the deposit, right? I have to do the whole move out process, and that means she has to move in somewhere else and pay the first month in deposit before I can. So there are weird, very senior specific, and maybe disabled specific. I mean, I think disability issues are similar in that they also have similar problems, where getting to the dumpster, or if they were laid up with a disability for a period of time where they can't do the day-to-day tasks of keeping their place clean. It would be nice if at some point, and I hate to throw stuff on you, it just would be nice to, whether it's from IC Housing Authority or from city staff, somewhere we could figure out, is there a use for these funds that we know exist, this $1 million fund, or whatever these future fee in lieu of fund payments that go into this affordable housing fund? Is there other ways to use that money for that kind of day-to-day assistance?
That's only for Riverfront Crossings District, number 1.
That's the only
That-
place you can use it at?
That pot.
Okay.
If you're talking about the Affordable Housing Fund from fee in lieu of, that's only for Riverfront Crossings, correct?
The Affordable Housing Fund and the fee in lieu are 2 different things. So
Okay.
there's the
Alright.
general fund, Affordable Housing Fund, that's the $1 million, and then, right, the Riverfront Crossings fee in lieu is just for the district.
Right.
And so what would be helpful for us to know is like what specifically, as a landlord, for you guys who are landlords, what's the incentive that you need? How much money do you need as a risk line item kind of thing?
We've got somebody like this lady who's been with there 16 years. I know she's gonna be a fall risk at some point. There's legal concerns.
Yeah, for the senior side, it's not as much risk mitigation as it is assistance.
And I don't know how to get them directed to healthcare or different, more serviced, assisted living kind of things. But is there any agency that works with that to channel these people, to someplace that they can at least live a better life?
I mean, the fact of the matter is those places are in short supply. Yeah, I mean,
And so are vouchers, by the way.
and also, right, we know that the vouchers are in use, but yeah. Yeah, I just, like I said, I don't know. Maybe we can throw some more ideas together, but I don't know. Anything else from you guys? I mean, I don't want to beleaguer this too long. It's nice to have the conversation. We just were kind of hoping that maybe this could open up some possibilities that we just haven't thought of.
I think you opened up a can of worms.
Well, that's true too. I am good at that.
What can? Yeah.
What? I know, but all of us, it's kind of a daunting discussion, really. Yes.
And there's going to be legal issues surrounding it from all sides.
Oh, sure.
Well, how about I will put together the stuff I found from the HUD stuff, and maybe I could just send it to Bree or Eric, and you
Maybe
guys
not.
can pass on. Okay.
Maybe not the 190-page one, though.
No. Well, and it is interesting, because, so this was the first interim report. The second interim report so what HUD did is there's a handful of public housing administrators all over the United States that they basically gave incentive money to and said, here's the 9 incentives, and you have to offer like 2 or 3 of them.
We're not a moving to work housing authority.
No,
so that's-
I know. This was just an example of public housing authorities utilizing these funds and they're getting positive feedback that landlords, private landlords, are expanding units and availability utilizing these incentives.
Yeah, but
Yeah, and there's also, there's obviously the HUD Exchange stuff as well, which is outside the moving to work, but.
so I would say moving to work, they get additional funds for those purposes that we do not receive as a non-moving to work housing authority, but we're more looking for ideas and we can figure out the details and how we're gonna fund it and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm just saying there's a lot of, the incentives I thought were
Yeah.
good. The incentives they list in here, not all of them are monetary either, which is nice. I mean, some of them are having just a liaison, a dedicated liaison at the the PHA level, which would be Iowa City Housing Authority. Just like something like that. I mean, I think all of us have had the issue of like, you never know who's working with who.
Well, and
You know,
somebody you could call to say,
right. Right.
can you hook this person up with?
And there was an
trailers?
advertising component on one of the incentives as well, as whereas
Yeah.
like the Public Housing Authority would advertise
Does
those. Yeah, there were some ideas that I liked, so.
So, the Landlords Association, I used to work for a nonprofit called the Housing Fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to go to Landlords Association early on. This was
we met
long
at Charter.
before you were where you are now. Yeah. So, does anybody do anybody but private landlords go to that association regularly?
That's all,
Okay.
all of ours.
No, does the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County attend those? Does anybody from the Housing Fellowship or PHA?
The fair housing seminar that we have in the summer, there's a couple of times when we got maybe
Yeah.
But not regularly.
speaker or the person from the Iowa Landlords Association, no.
Okay.
For our big speakers, we'll have them show up. But yeah, Rachel from Iowa City Housing Authority comes, and Stan
Okay.
comes to almost every
Oh,
one of our
good.
meetings.
That's good. Yeah.
And
yeah.
then where does Jessica?
And,
Who does she work
She's
with?
the
Affordable
Johnson
Housing
County
Coalition.
Housing
She comes.
Affordable Housing Coalition.
Right, so she comes to all of our meetings as well.
Okay, good. Yeah.
And then
She probably has some ideas.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, Terry, Erica, thank you. Eric, do you have anything? I mean, I think we kind of covered.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I wanted to bring up one other thing that I heard about I think in Oakland, in California, where they've got a bunch of empty or vacant places, and the city is now starting to charge a vacancy tax to basically say if you're going to keep your place, if you're going to have a rental unit and you're not going to have it occupied, then you can pay a little bit more. And so that's another outside of the box sort
It's
of.
going to kill the hive.
But it's like to try to find out or solve the problem of if there are vacant units here in Iowa City, what is it gonna take to get them filled? And
Then that could go in the pot that you were talking about.
exactly, and if landlords and owners knew that, again, they've got that partnership, so that risk is mitigated, they might be more open to filling those places, because, revenue coming in is better than no revenue coming in. But that's all, of course, the damage that can be done, at the expense of that revenue coming in. So do you have the information on, say, which property owners are, have vacant units, for example? So, but everybody's got to have or you need a license, right? That's associated
Yeah, permit.
with a permit, right? So, but you don't have information on how many of those are actually occupied. You have a
No,
certain
we're
number
not
of
tracking
permits.
that. It's really just a point in time when we're at the unit too, so.
One idea was to have a kind of a clearinghouse, and it can be a web-based thing where landlords can,
Can't talk unless you're in a microphone.
sorry, Jerry again. One idea that was floated around was to have a clearinghouse, some kind of a web-based platform where individual landlords could post or advertise vacant properties to one general source. Because right now, my advertising platform goes out to 12 different things, Red.com and Zillow and Trulia and everything else. Not everybody's looking at that stuff, especially people that are maybe the only computer they got is their phone. So if we had a central basis where we could work, again, in partnership with the city, where here's where the private landlords can post these things. These are vacant things that we're having trouble getting rented, and then those people that are having a hard time finding properties, maybe we can figure out how to make those things match.
Plus, I would argue that Iowa City Housing Authority, I get,
We can post it right,
people show up at my door and and they'll say, well, I went to, half the time I don't remember who they're working with at Iowa City Housing, but B, Iowa City Housing doesn't know on any given basis. Rachel and Denise and all, everybody there, Carrie, none of them know at every given moment how many housing choice voucher accepting units or properties are out there at any given time, because they don't have a central. Right, that's what I'm saying. If there was absolutely a way to, on a monthly or even daily or weekly basis, to upload what we have to them, so that when they have people come to the office, it would be great. I think without a doubt, that's one of those.
We could help promote that through the landlord association,
Yeah.
because a lot of these people, they're not tuned, they don't come to these meetings, they don't listen, they're not involved.
Right.
They're just trying to do their own little thing, and if we start giving them an opportunity to, hey, why have you been sitting on this thing for 6 months? Put it in here, and then if we can get something to work together as far as risk mitigation or some kind of thresholds, that would allow, a little easier access to these, borderline people. We're not gonna be able to help the bottom of the barrel, but we're gonna at least be able, should be able to help the people that are at the threshold,
It seems like these solutions would get more bang for your buck than the buying a property for $400,000 to try to find somebody. Now you've solved one person's addressed one person's issues.
How many risk mitigations you could fund? $400,000.
Exactly, and that's what I'm trying to do to look at how can we get that bang and actually address even just that central section of people that you can help and actually have a meaningful impact. And then you could figure out the more difficult or more challenged as far as housing goes. You can start to address their needs from a different lens. But it's like if there's that one group of people that you can help.
Well, and when you talk about bottom of the barrel, and when Terry talks about the bottom of the barrel, the people who are absolutely coming out of homelessness, no job.
I didn't mean that
No, I mean, just, I
Right,
mean,
yeah.
they're
I
abs, you know,
understand.
the thing is, you know, no damage mitigation fund is going to help them right now because we can't get them qualified. It's a fight I have, and I love the workers at Shelter House, and they are the most doggedly persistent champions for their clients. And, you know, they come in, they come in once or twice a week, and, you know, I have this person, no job, no income, no, they currently don't have anything in place, you know, we can do 2 months in a deposit. I still can't get them qualified because there's zero income, right? They don't have money to buy cleaning supplies or, you know, keep their place clean or, you know, and that's a much larger incentive conversation we can have in the future as well, which is, and whether that is through Shelter House, finding more funds to go to Shelter House for that kind of thing, where those tenants no longer, I mean, that almost becomes minimum basic income kind of discussion, just on a much smaller scale, because if these people had that minimum income coming in for a source for a year, they suddenly are no longer unhousable. I mean, they suddenly are in the mix with the other applicants. But Terry, Erica, thanks for coming.
Yeah,
I appreciate
thanks.
it.
All right.
Any other thoughts from people on the dais?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Well, why don't I'll get information out, stuff that I put together, and we can just share it out, and then you guys obviously can, you know, just talk and see. Thank you, guys. You know, and maybe we can roll back around with some harder ideas or harder discussion at a future work session.
That was my question logistically. Do you want to just let me know when you want to talk about it again, or it seems
Yes.
like you maybe want to read some of the materials?
Yeah.
Maybe just keep us posted.
Yeah. Does that work? Okay. All right, on to number 8, review and consider approval of fiscal year 26 legacy aid to agencies application materials. This is the amended stuff that we all discussed and agreed and worked on. For those of you who are new, there was a whole process with the previous board where we had a couple commissioners that worked really hard on making some streamlining adjustments to all the application materials to try to, make it more fair for everybody, make it a little more objective, and also make our lives easier by not falling into the minutia so much. Staff discussion, any thoughts, talks?
I have just a quick background I wanted to give on the whole process since we do have a new group. So our legacy aid to agencies funding, you've seen a lot of applications through the city that the city administers. This is an application that is taken through United Way. So the city, Johnson County, Coralville, I think North Liberty now, all of the funders are using one application to kind of make it easier for nonprofits. So they're not applying to 5 different cities, they're applying through one application. So this was a process of, like Kyle mentioned, the subcommittee working to make recommendations for the application. And then we're also balancing those with the needs of the funders, trying to make one application work for everybody. Wanna talk about the changes, or?
Yeah, I can talk about the specific changes to the application. So one of the questions that we answered as a subcommittee was that the agency still wanted to use the joint funding process. So we're sticking with the United Way process. That's what all the agencies preferred that. So moved forward with that. So as part of the application, they developed an agency profile, which is stuff that's going to be the same year after year that the agency won't have to fill out again. They'll do a narrative about the community need that they're serving, which won't typically change year after year. And then we're not going to score that information anymore because it's required for them to qualify. So we're not putting a score on that. Resolved a lot of technical issues with the application, mainly in the budget section, with a simplified form to help the applicants. If you're familiar with the application, there's a lot of demographic information that is requested. We added an unknown field under some of those to capture all the beneficiaries, along with an explanation field for agencies to explain if they're missing information. For example, we have a couple agencies who don't collect demographics, and that gives them an opportunity to explain, like free lunch, like why they don't collect that demographics and who they're serving, kind of thing. We revised some of the language in the narrative questions. We didn't change them significantly, but we listened to the agency feedback and revised a few things that would help them continue to use the funds flexibly for operations, which is our intended use of the funds. Questions were reordered a little bit. Some of them were combined or separated, but still the same information. And then we updated the outcome measures. That might be one of the biggest changes to the application is the outcome measures have been revised. We did this together with all the other funders to meet everyone's different needs. And I think with this application, we're going to have the agencies select which outcome measures they want to provide over time. So that will be a little bit of a change and adjustment. And then from there, we revised our scoring criteria a little bit to match the new application. So that's what's in your packet today. Our timeline is that the application will go live on September 1st and be due on October 15th. And there will be opportunities for training for applicants through United Way.
I do have a question on the general information page. I think it's the first page. No, it's, yeah. No, it's second page. It says city steps priorities, and there's services to the homeless or those at risk of homelessness, and then there's a whole list. And then on the common outcomes options, it talks about affordable housing services. Is that covered under services to homeless and those at risk of homelessness?
The agencies that we serve, like the legacy agencies, there aren't any that have like direct housing, I don't
Okay.
think. I know that some of the other partner agencies would probably fill that out, but probably not any of Iowa cities.
Okay,
And also, since we're going through city steps, we can update that as well.
okay. I think it looks good. It was a lot of work.
Yeah. Yes.
The legacy, remind me one more time what the source of funds are for the legacy agencies.
The source of funding is we use a portion of the CDBG public service funding. We can use up to 15% of our CDBG allocation. You guys typically don't see this, but that's how we fund it. And then the rest, so that's like $120,000, and then the rest is local general fund dollars.
Okay. Thank you.
And is that 700 this year, something like that?
It's
A little
yeah,
under
little-
8? Okay.
Yep. We've been doing 3% increases annually
Yeah.
since the big increase.
We jumped from what, like 3 something to 6 something?
Yeah, 1 year.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Does this need approval, or is this just, we're moving forward, whether we say yea or nay?
We need approval.
Okay, well then I would accept a motion to approve the Legacy Aid to Agencies application materials.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
A second.
All opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Pass. That just takes us to 9, staff and commission updates. Do we have any commission updates from any commissioners? No? Staff?
I would like to congratulate the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County. They're going to be celebrating their 20-year anniversary
Oh, yeah.
later
Yeah.
this month.
And they celebrated it big this month.
They what?
They're celebrating big. Yeah. They have a bunch of stuff going on. I know I've seen,
Well, this is the trust fund, not the coalition. Two different things.
I thought TF is, I thought I saw some
Dylan
emails come
McKay.
about stuff happening.
I think they're doing some kind of event.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the day, but.
And I think it's on the 28th.
Yeah, it's at Cherry True Blood.
Okay.
Yes, 5 o'clock. The 20th anniversary is out at Terry True Blood
Yeah.
on August 28th.
Yeah, I forgot the date.
I was like, I know I got an email about it. I was positive. Okay, staff?
Oh, did you have anything?
Our big updates are that we have been working away at our consolidated planning process. So we've been very busy holding stakeholder sessions, public input meetings. There's a page on our website, icgov.org/2030, where you can go to find any information about how to participate in that plan, And I wanted to point out, I mentioned 3 public meetings and 7 stakeholder sessions, and we are gonna do another session on the 9th for anybody that maybe missed that and wanted to participate. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up for that on Zoom. It's on the City Steps page. The Zoom registration link is there. The other thing I wanted to mention is our housing survey is still available. So if you haven't taken that or you know anyone that you could encourage to take that, there's the survey is on that same website and it's available in 5 languages. And Erica mentioned the study earlier, but some of that information is going to go into our analysis of impediments study. So if you could help us get the word out on that, there's also some flyers on the table over there. If you want to take any, feel free. They're translated into 5 languages.
Can you email me about the August, or the September 9th?
Yes, gladly.
Okay. I had not seen that come back through, so it's good to know.
Unrelated, anything else on the con plan?
Nope.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention, you probably saw on the calendar, there's a couple spots for maybe presentations like we had tonight to the commission. So if there's areas of interest, topics that you're interested in, things you want to hear more about, if you could send me an email, we can maybe work on trying to plug some of those things into the calendar for you.
With as many new members, I mean, Rachel coming in and talking would probably be good again.
Rachel Carter.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like, those numbers from Iowa City Housing Authority, are always, it's always interesting to see the changes, and now that she's really kind of solidified what's going on over there, after her kind of introductory period, it's, yeah, she's been really good to work with, so. Anybody else, anything else? There is an opening for an assistant housing inspector. If you know anybody who's interested in working with the city of Iowa City, it is their code enforcement officer position, driving around, wagging fingers at people who don't mow their lawn and get rid of their snow. So, yeah,
The weed Nazi.
yeah, so if you know anybody, you get to work with Stan, which is not bad. And
Same office as us?
yeah, so, I know that's just got posted the other day. I don't know, it's not filled yet, as far as I understand. I thought I saw an update today, it was still open,
I
or?
believe it's open till the 21st.
Okay, so, if you know anybody that wants to work in that part of the city, that's city staff, so.
What's the expected experience?
I don't know. I believe, I don't know that they have any real they like people that are coming from a buildings or construction background. I know for a lot of the inspection stuff, for the assistant inspector for code violations, I really think, I'm thinking the people who've done it, Emma and Zach, they've really just, really come as a blank slate for that position, so, yeah, so.
You
and I
have to be
think
able to work with people
You do have to be able to work with
and
people.
obtain compliance,
Yes.
is what I would say.
And it's been it's been a good bounding board as far as that position the last couple of years into, other positions both at the city and even in the private sector, so, yeah. All right, well, do we have anything else on the agenda? I believe that's it.
I think that's it.
No, there was, I did want to ask one question. Is there a program for down payment assistance for first-time homeowners?
We do have a down payment assistance program.
Okay, and that's on the website?
It is, yep.
Does IFA still have one?
Not sure how much they
Iowa
offer.
Finance Authority may have.
Through the city,
Down
we
payment
offer
assistance.
just under $25,000 for income qualifying households.
You don't happen to know what the income qualifying?
Under 80%, but it depends on how many people are in your household. There's a chart on our website that you can look at.
Okay.
Don't they also have to be in certain census blocks, the houses that you're buying?
We expanded our program. didn't
Yeah, I think we expanded, and aren't doing that anymore, but
Okay,
I have to
'cause-
double check.
That would be
You have to be in Iowa
80%.
City.
Of 72?
Because the
If you have
census
four.
blocks,
If you have four.
so
If you
there
have
there
four.
were very rarely houses
my
in the
son's-
census blocks
They would be
that were
started, that'd be
under
80%.
the threshold that did
80%,
not
okay.
have
No,
current
that would be
rental.
80%,
be-
that or less.
Yeah, I believe we
Right
expanded
where
that.
they are.
Okay.
Oh, man.
So,
Nice.
and now this number is, I think this is from 2 years ago. So, I don't know but it should be in the general area, yeah.
Awesome.
So, but those numbers are on, I know, either on Iowa City Housing's or Iowa City's site, the 80% number, so. All right, well, if there's nothing else, I would love a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Need a
Second.
All right, all opposed, all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, staff, for another fantastic evening.